A major component of my ministry and that of the NEA's mission is to protect the public health of Singaporeans. What that means is public hygiene, food safety, the quality of the air and the water that we all breathe and drink. This is ultimate democracy, the air we all breathe and the water that we all drink. This commitment also extends to the Haze, although, quite frankly, where the Haze is concerned, our hands are somewhat more tied than in other areas. With the Haze, we have no direct sight of the source at all. It is hundreds of kilometers away, and is spread over an area that's many times the size of Singapore. In fact, various estimates have shown that every year, the area of forest that is burned is probably about 7 times the size of Singapore. So this is on a scale that probably most of us cannot even imagine. Our objective, therefore, are to detect the fires early, to warn if it is imminent, and to mitigate the effects of the haze if it does arrive. Let me get the first slide up. To detect fires, we use satellite pictures like this. This is the situation on the 14th of June. You'll notice the white clouds that you see. That's not the haze, but that's clouds. And if you look carefully, you'll see a few red spots. These are hotspots. But the point I wanted to make in this slide is that even with a satellite picture, if there's local cloud cover, you will not be able to see every hotspot that is burning beneath that. You will not be able to assess the ferocity of the fires or the density of the plumes. And there's also the subsequent question of the wind. As every sailor knows, wind can be both a blessing and a bane. Similarly, when we wake up in the morning and you look out of your window, whether it is a blue or a hazy sky depends very much on the location and number of the fires, the density of the smoke, and the direction of the wind. And we must not forget that while the fires are beyond our immediate sight, but actually the haze only takes a few hours to reach us. This makes early warning very challenging, even with perfect knowledge of the ground situation and winds. Under ideal conditions, the longest warning that we can have from the time the smoke emerges from the fire to the time the haze hits us is around 6 to 10 hours. 6 to 10 hours. And this helps frame how difficult early warning is. Ms. Irene Ng asked me to share my assessment of the haze situation. Frankly, the haze is not a problem that will go away easily or quickly. This is a complex problem, and not least because it originates from the fires on land in another sovereign country. Let me show you the second slide. This is the situation on the 19th of June. This slide shows you quite dramatically the extent of the burning that quite often takes place in Sumatra. You can see many more red spots now. Those are the hot spots. And what is most obvious in this picture is the yellow plumes, the haze that is emanating from Sumatra and flowing across the straits to Singapore. The problem transcends an environmental solution because the root cause of this is really commercial. Some big-time plantation companies and paper mills have a total disregard for their social and environmental responsibilities and indeed of the local Indonesian laws themselves. Their actions have severely affected millions of people in Indonesia itself, in Malaysia, and of course the 5 million of us resident in Singapore. My ministry and the other agencies have been working with Indonesia over the years to press for solutions. But let me also tell you very frankly, the improvements have been incremental at best. And I will say more about this later. The recent haze spell was particularly bad 3 weeks ago because there was a dry spell in Sumatra Indeed, I think members will also recall there was a dry spell in Singapore as well at that same point in time. And there was also an unfavorable wind. Basically, the wind was blowing from the west and conveying all these smoke plumes across the straits to Singapore. We were actually gearing up for the onset of the haze season. In fact, this is somewhat earlier than the usual haze season in other years. But the situation deteriorated sharply during a very short period. Nonetheless, given the circumstances, our officers acted swiftly and they worked very hard to detect, to give warning, and to put in place mitigation measures. Let me go through a chronology of events with you. If I can get the next slide. This slide plots the number of visible hotspots over the course of time from the 12th of June until the 7th of July. It is annotated by key events. The Interagency Haze Task Force, which comprises 23 public agencies, was set up in 1994 to coordinate our national action plans, to ensure accurate information flow, and to put in place plans to ensure service continuity. This task force met on the 29th of May, before the haze unfolded, in order to update its plans. Engineer Dr. Lee asked when my ministry first alerted the Indonesian government on the haze. On the 14th of June, I think that is a Friday, 14th of June, the hotspot count was 46 in Sumatra. 41 of these hotspots were in Riau. However, the full extent of hotspot activities could not be determined fully from the satellite images due to cloudy conditions, as I showed you earlier on. The PSI readings went from good to moderate at 1 p.m. on the 14th of June. That same day, NEA issued a public haze advisory. I'm not sure how many members actually read the public haze advisory on the 14th of June. NEA also updated its website. NEA contacted the head of the Forest Fires Division of the Indonesian Ministry of Environment to seek an urgent update on the ground situation and to request that urgent measures be taken to mitigate the haze. Unfortunately, the situation worsened on the 17th. Satellite pictures now showed 113 hotspots in Sumatra, of which 106 were in Riau, and the 24-hour PSI at 3 p.m. on the 17th of June had increased to between 67 to 80. That's in the moderate range. At this point, NEA issued another public haze advisory. The CEO of NEA sent an official note to the Deputy Minister of the Indonesian Ministry of Environment on the 17th of June to warn of an alarming increase in the number of hotspots in Sumatra and sought Indonesia's assistance to enforce the appropriate legislation on plantation companies to prohibit, slash, and burn. The CEO of NEA also wrote to the Malaysian Department of Environment, because the Malaysians are currently the host of the next Sub-Regional Ministerial Steering Committee on Transboundary Haze. We requested the Malaysians to advance the meeting. On the 18th of June, the next day, the satellite pictures showed 187, I think you can see that, that's the first peak, 187 hotspots in Sumatra. The PSI was now 115 to 127, in the unhealthy range. That same day, I telephoned my counterpart, the Indonesian Environment Minister, Baltazar Kambuaya, to express my grave concern. I requested that Indonesia take action to put out the fires and offered our assistance. I also requested him to publish the concession maps. This has been something I've been urging for a very long time. To publish the concession maps so that we could identify the companies and the persons who were responsible for these fires. Our Foreign Minister Shanmugam separately called the Indonesian Foreign Minister the same day. I followed up with a letter to Minister Kambuaya on the 19th of June 2013 to reiterate our grave concerns and to re-offer assistance. In response to our calls, the Indonesian Foreign Ministry called for an emergency meeting with Singapore and Malaysia with Singapore on the 20th of June 2013 in Jakarta. Despite the short notice, our delegation, led by the CEO and comprising staff from MEWR, NEA, and MFA, attended the meeting. We reiterated our concerns, offered assistance, and called on Indonesia to take further action to address the haze. The Indonesian officials conveyed that they were taking action at the provincial level in tackling the ongoing fires. To further underscore the seriousness of the situation, Prime Minister Lee sent me to Jakarta as his special envoy on the 21st of June 2013 to convey his personal letter to the Indonesian President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono. The letter stressed the following. First, this is a recurrent problem with regional implications. Second, strong and effective action is needed to be taken against the companies involved in illegal land clearing practices. Third, if any Singapore-linked companies were involved, Indonesia should share with us the evidence so that we could pursue the matter. Fourth, that countries in the region had to work together to overcome the problem. And fifth, Singapore stood ready to cooperate fully with Indonesia. This included renewing the environmental collaboration between Singapore and Jambi province, or indeed expanding that cooperation to other provinces as well. As with previous years, we offered a Haze assistance package that included aircraft for cloud seeding, satellite imagery, and hotspot coordinates. The Environment Minister of Indonesia received a letter on the President's behalf. The President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono replied formally to Prime Minister Lee on the 3rd of July 2013. He acknowledged the seriousness of the situation this year, and he informed PM Lee that the Indonesian authorities would undertake comprehensive investigations so that, quote, those responsible are firmly held to account, close quotations. Those responsible are firmly held to account. He highlighted Indonesia's firefighting efforts to reduce the number of hotspots. The President also stated that the government of Indonesia has been in the final stages of resubmitting the ASEAN Agreement on Transboundary Haze Pollution to Indonesia's House of Representatives, the DPR for short, for ratification by the House. The President also very graciously reiterated his apologies and reassured us that they would spare no effort to address this problem. On the domestic front, my colleague, Minister for Defence, has explained the convening and the actions of the Crisis Management Group. And as you're also aware, Prime Minister Lee appointed the Haze Interministerial Committee led by Minister Ng on the 20th of June to coordinate a whole-of-government response. From this chronology of events, you will see that the government has been monitoring the haze situation closely over many years and more closely over the last 1 month. And we did our best to get the Indonesian authorities to deal with the source of the problem, even as we geared up to take protective action locally. And I said earlier that we've been working with the Indonesian government to try to improve the situation on the ground, and let me give you some idea of the current state of play at the ground at the provincial level. First, at the government-to-government level, we need Indonesia and other like-minded countries to commit more seriously to work together to tackle transboundary haze. Mr. Muhammad Faisal and Mr. Yee asked about the progress of the regional agreements and the platforms established to address transboundary haze. The ASEAN Regional Haze Action Plan was endorsed by the ASEAN Environment Ministers in December 1997, a long time ago, arising from the period of intense fire and transboundary haze pollution that year. This has since been superseded by the ASEAN Agreement on Transboundary Haze Pollution formulated in 2002. The latter built on the ideas from the RHAP such as monitoring, assessment and prevention, technical cooperation and scientific research, and mechanisms for coordination. Under this framework, Singapore hosts the ASEAN Specialized Meteorological Center that monitors the regional hotspot situation and provides early warning to all affected countries. It means not just Singapore, this is a regional center. To all affected countries when the ASMC observes a significant rise in hotspot counts. Meanwhile, an ASEAN Coordinating Center facilitates the channeling of regional resources to countries requesting for assistance to combat fires. However, the 2002 ASEAN Agreement has yet to be ratified by Indonesia. I hope this agreement will be ratified by the time the ASEAN Environment Ministers meet in October this year. The credibility of ASEAN depends very much on the willingness of its individual members to live up to our international obligations. However, whilst Indonesia's ratification of the treaty will send a strong signal of high-level political commitment, this in itself may not be sufficient to prevent a haze if the measures taken on the ground, investigations and enforcement, remain weak. Mr. Zaki Mohammed has asked whether there has been any progress in tackling the haze issue since October 2012. In 2006, Singapore initiated a sub-regional grouping, the Sub-Regional Ministerial Steering Committee on Transboundary Haze Pollution. And this comprises Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore and Thailand. The MSC has met 14 times since then, focusing on assisting Indonesia in implementing its plan of action to combat haze. At the last meeting, which was held in October 2012, the ministers agreed to explore sharing concession maps and using satellite and mapping technologies to monitor hotspots in order to hold plantation companies and landowners accountable for their land clearing practices. A technical task force currently led by Singapore and comprising experts from other MSC countries is now studying the implementation details. The technology platform will be ready soon. What we need now is for all the countries to provide official, accurate concession maps. And we will push for this urgently at the upcoming meeting next week. To make a stronger push for concrete actions, I will be seeking clear deliverables from next week's MSC meeting. To Singapore, the key outcomes we want from next week are the following. First, that MSC countries submit their concession maps and agree to a date for the public launch of the ASEAN Sub-Regional Haze Monitoring System platform that will enable the identification of errant companies. Second, that MSC countries involve high-level officials from all relevant ministries and agencies from each country. The reason for this is because this is not a pure environmental problem. We need, in the case of Indonesia, to have the cooperation and full support of other ministries like the Ministry of Forestry, the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Natural Resources, and this requires a whole-of-government approach, a whole-of-government commitment, and not just confined to the Ministries of Environment. Third, we hope that Indonesia will agree to renew the collaboration that we have successfully had in Jambi and in other provinces if possible. Fourth, that Indonesia commits to ratify the ASEAN Transboundary Haze Pollution Agreement as soon as possible. Let me now move on to bilateral collaboration, which I think Mr. Ang has asked about. I had mentioned briefly our collaboration with the province of Jambi. I would characterize this as one of our more successful efforts, and indeed we did observe a greater reduction in the number of hotspots in Jambi province during our years of collaboration compared to other fire-prone provinces in Sumatra. The action programs benefited the local authorities and the communities by enhancing their capabilities and knowledge in the areas of fire prevention, fire suppression, and alternative livelihoods. I should say that a major success factor was the strong support given by the then Governor of Jambi, Pak Zulkifli Nordin. And this illustrates the necessity for political buy-in and commitment at the provincial level and on the ground. Unfortunately, this collaboration was not renewed after 2011. The picture shows, if you look very carefully, you see a tall pole. That's a meteorological pole, which helps gather meteorological data, wind direction, moisture, rain, etc. If you look even more closely, you see a little small box in which are analyzers for air quality. These were provided to our colleagues in Jambi by the Singapore government, but all technology requires maintenance and requires repair. Unfortunately, this is now not working, and we haven't been able to gain access to fix it. But we hope the Indonesian government will renew these agreements and allow us to do more work at a local level on a mutually beneficial basis. And so we have conveyed to Indonesia that we want to renew this collaboration, and we also want to undertake projects which promote sustainable agricultural practices. In fact, President Yudhoyono had already agreed to support this when he met Prime Minister Lee in April this year. And we had been awaiting confirmation from our Indonesian counterparts. And we stand ready to replicate this project in Jambi in other fire-prone provinces such as Riau, which was the source of most of the haze that hit us this time round. Secondly, now beyond government-to-government engagement, my ministry has also been engaging stakeholders and interest groups, ranging from NGOs and think tanks to companies. We believe this is a useful and essential complement to the intergovernmental processes. For this reason, at the sub-regional level, we have initiated a forum that will enable MSC countries to reach out to existing and potential stakeholders, to exchange best practices and to form new partnerships. My ministry organized and hosted the first MSC forum in 2009. In 2012, the Singapore Institute of International Affairs supported Brunei in hosting the second MSC forum. This forum involves NGOs, academics, companies, and other relevant stakeholders. So it's a process that exists in parallel to the intergovernment processes. My ministry has also been identifying and will be approaching the companies themselves to encourage them to establish a positive model in the operation and the management of plantations. We want to show that such responsible practices are workable, practical, sustainable, and viable. And we hope that this will become the accepted way of doing business and will be replicated across the industry. Third, I would like to respond to Mr. Nicholas Fang and Ms. Irene Ng, who asked what the steps other stakeholders, including Singaporeans, can take to ensure a long-term solution. Every one of us, as a consumer, has the power to influence the behavior of a company. A key cause of the haze is the clearance of plantation land by burning, because this is the cheapest way to do so. Let me give you an idea of the scale. To pay someone and give that person a jerry can of kerosene to burn 1 hectare of forest costs about 6 Singapore dollars. If you pay a team of contractors to use chainsaws to cut forests, tractors and bulldozers to clear the logs, and then plow the ground, it'll cost you thousands of dollars more. Between $6 and thousands of dollars. That is the profit motive. That is where the source of the haze lies. And that's why we need not only legislation, but we also need consumer pressure to be applied. Otherwise, the temptation to go for the cheapest way, or the most unsustainable and irresponsible way, that temptation will be too great. Through our purchasing decisions, we can punish businesses that undertake illegal burning and reward those who adopt sustainable practices. And I want to say here, the supply chain also has a role. I was very encouraged to learn that the Singapore Manufacturers Federation urged its members not to have any business dealings with errant organizations and their subsidiaries involved in these illegal fires. The Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil has also called on 5 of its members alleged to have been involved in illegal land clearing to submit digital maps of their plantations and aid its investigations. I encourage more of such ground-up, non-governmental approaches to hold people accountable and to ensure that transparency and data is available. Let me conclude by saying that my ministry's core mission in the haze has been to detect, to warn, to mitigate. In the areas of detection and warning, the Meteorological Service of Singapore, of NEA, is looking to enhance its capabilities for the early warning of haze. This includes making use of more meteorological data, finer resolution satellite imagery, enhanced dispersion modeling capabilities, and installation of more sensors. Let me try to explain what all that means. For instance, by next year, and certainly by 2015, we will be gaining feeds from new satellites which have greater resolution. We need resolution down to about 1 or 2 kilometer range to be able to identify a hotspot. The new satellite will also have greater spectral sensitivity, which means you can also see fires in an early stage, or maybe even at an underground level. Third, we need more wind sensors, not only in Singapore, but indeed in the Straits and in the shores beyond ours as well. These wind sensors will input into the more complicated computer models which predict weather patterns, whether there will be rain or drought, winds, speed of the wind, which determines how fast the haze reaches us, direction of the wind, which is the difference between why we had a clear Saturday on the 22nd and MEWR and Johor was completely overcome by haze. So these sophisticated computer models are still in a state of development. But as Minister Ng said just now, what we need is to be able to predict the haze, the density, not 1 hour from now or not 24 hours ago, but the next 24 hours. So in the same way people have gotten used to weather forecasts, we will have to upgrade our capability to be able to give you haze forecasts. Because these forecasts are how you will plan your day. What activities businesses need to take, schools, hospitals, everything depends on a forward-looking prediction. And I cannot give you the assurance that we can be 100% accurate. It's not possible. Everyone who engages in weather forecasting knows that. But we can improve the precision of our forecasts. And that's something which we're going to have to work very hard on over the next 1 or 2 years. I also cannot emphasize enough that for a lasting and permanent solution, we need the firm commitment and resolute action by the Indonesian government at all levels. We appreciate that the President of Indonesia has acknowledged the severity of the situation and has given his commitment to tackle the issue. Quite frankly, I think it was his apology and his commitment that made a difference on the ground and helped to reduce or at least prevented people from starting more fires without having to worry about consequences. And of course, we were helped by the rains which have now fallen over Sumatra over the last 1 week. But we will stand ready to work and to do our best with Indonesia as a close neighbor and as a partner in ASEAN. So the haze situation today has improved a lot compared to what we faced 3 weeks ago. But I also want to be honest with Singaporeans and tell you that this beautiful day which we have now could be only a temporary respite. The dry season is not over yet, and we need continued vigilance and we need decisive action by the Indonesian authority to prevent another recurrence of the haze over the next 2 to 3 months. MEWR and NEA will do our part to detect and to give warning of the haze and to mitigate its impact, but we need the support and cooperation of all stakeholders. And I also want to end by thanking Singaporeans for their calmness, their patience, and the fact that they refuse to get rattled by the situation. And it is that ability to respond sensibly, rationally, cohesively, and collectively as a people that makes the difference and makes me confident that we will get through this together, whatever happens. Thank you, Madam Speaker.